Guys, after receiving the massive bombshell earlier this week, Kevin Warren coming out and admitting, saying basically, listen, we want 20 teams. We want a West Wing. We've heard the rumors of Washington, Oregon, Stanford, and California. I thought I would give my official realignment predictions because people are taking it a step forward and they're saying, does the Big 12 snipe some ACC teams if the SEC responds to the Big 10's West Wing by also adding ACC teams? And does the ACC get 8 members to agree to dissolve their conference? How does ESPN play into this? They have the ACC network. What do? Let me give you guys a realistic realignment scenario, and this would be through the year 2025, and then we'd see another wave of realignment. We're expecting that to happen around 2030, but this is the endgame predictions right now. It's 3 20-team super conferences, and it does have the Big Ten adding California, Stanford, Washington, and Oregon. It makes too much sense. The Big Ten wants to alleviate some of the travel concerns that USC and UCLA are going to face, considering they're the only teams that are in that region of the country. You add these 6 West Coast teams, that helps you. Also, ESPN adding these 6 teams reopens TV negotiations. They can renegotiate certain things, and I do think that ESPN will get their Big Ten piece of the pie by taking the late night Big Ten after dark window with these 6 teams and what Kevin Warren wants and Gene Smith and all of the Big Ten. This is what they envision. Noon on Fox Sports, that's big noon. 3:30 game on CBS, 7:30 game on NBC, 10:30 game on ESPN. That is the future of the Big Ten. That is a total Big Ten takeover of college football. And right now, I mean, the things we've been hearing about Notre Dame, I always leave open the idea that Notre Dame can join the Big Ten. From a money perspective, it makes sense for the Big Ten, and it makes sense for Notre Dame. But I can only go off what we're hearing, and what we're hearing, the only rumors we've gotten about Notre Dame is that they want to stay an independent. They value being an independent. And honestly, if we do get the 12-team expanded playoff in 2025, like I expect, that would only strengthen their cause to remain an independent, because theoretically Notre Dame as an independent could lose 2 games and still get into a 12-team playoff, even with no conference championship. So that would only strengthen the idea, but it does make sense from a money perspective, so that always has to be an option. If Notre Dame says, we're done being an independent, we want a big payday, let's go to the Big Ten. They clearly want us because we're going to make more money, and we're going to make the conference more money, and every team in the conference more money. That is something that could happen. So those 4 teams going to the Big Ten, I think they all fit. And in that scenario, we're not going to get into the whole unequal revenue distribution. I think there's a way to do it that would work in the Big Ten, but it's going to end up, I'm just going to end up going on a 10-minute rampage about it, and I don't want to do that. So we'll see if that comes. I know people are going to say if these 4 teams get added, you will dilute other teams and they will get less money, considering you're adding 4 more teams. That's one of the issues. That's where unequal revenue distribution comes in. And then people argue and say, well, the teams that get less money would want to leave the conference. My question would be, where would they go? If Rutgers or Northwestern, and it's nothing against those teams, I'm not saying that, but it's clear they would get some of their TV money cut, let's say from $100 million to $80 million. Where else are they going to get $80 million from? What other conference is giving that to them? There's nowhere for them to go. But either way, this would be my prediction right now. The Big Ten wants to add more teams. They want to balance the conference a little bit more. These 4 teams from the West Coast allows them to reopen the TV negotiations, get more money, and add ESPN to do a late night Big Ten thing with ESPN. That's my prediction there. Next, we have the SEC, who will respond to the Big Ten's West Wing by adding Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, and Miami. I think those are the four major players that will be going to the SEC from the ACC. Of course, all of this hinges on the next major big story in conference realignment, which is, can those ACC teams get out of their grant of rights deal? They would need 8 teams to agree to dissolve the conference. There's 4 right there who would certainly do it if they could get into the SEC, because they'd be due for a massive payday. Who are the other 4 teams? Well, you would have the Big 12 adding Colorado, Utah, Arizona State. That's not a surprise. Those were the 4 teams mentioned, and I think Oregon and Washington going to the Big Ten triggers this move, or maybe it's even the opposite, because I have heard people say the Big Ten publicly does not want to be known as the team that killed the Pac-12. So the Big Ten may say, let's wait, let's let Colorado, Utah, Arizona State go to the Big 12 before we pick off Oregon and Washington. But either way, these things are going to act right in tandem with the teams going from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten and the teams going from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, which would trigger the Pac-12 being completely dissolved. And I've got a % chance that happens at the bottom. But you can see those 4 teams, and then the Big 12 also picking up a few ACC teams to get them to 20 total teams in their conference. Georgia Tech, due to the Atlanta market, Louisville, Pittsburgh, and Virginia Tech. I just think those teams fit the Big 12 a little bit more than some of the other teams. So the Big 12 ends up with 20 teams. And a lot of those, like Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech, that's just speculation. I don't know who the exact teams are going to be. I'm just guessing based on who I think would fit the conference well. And a team like Georgia Tech, Louisville, they've got money. You could see them joining, and that would give us 3 total 20-team super conferences. And then the whole thing with ESPN and their TV deal. So the ESPN, we know they have the ACC network. I think if this is what happens, they're just going to transition from the ACC network and make a Big 12 network. And that's what I feel like they're going to do. So they would have all the major rights to Big 12 games. We've already heard the rumors. They're pivoting. They had money allocated for the Big 10. They struck out. So now they've got extra money that they were going to use on the Big 10. They're going to use that money probably on the Big 12 and secure Big 12 Tier 1 TV rights. And I think if the ACC dissolves, they would just shift it from an ACC network to a Big 12 network. That's my theory right now. And then the independents, so Notre Dame staying an independent. We talked about that. And then some teams, I just have no clue what's going to happen. Duke, Virginia, Syracuse, San Diego State, who might be the ones that are getting completely screwed out of all of this, considering the Pac-12 does want San Diego State. The unfortunate thing for San Diego State, there might not be a Pac-12 to go to. So San Diego State is an attractive team. I've heard people approach and say San Diego State to the Big 12. I mean, maybe it could happen instead of one of those other teams. It could possibly happen. I'm not saying, this is all speculation. Maybe San Diego State does go to the Big 12 in a 20-team Big 12 conference. But right now, I don't know what's going to happen to them. I know the Pac-12 wants them, but the Pac-12 is really teetering on the brink of disaster right now. And then you would have the Mountain West adding on Washington State and Oregon State. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Both of those teams fit the Mountain West very well, and the Mountain West would stay together in this scenario. I've got it right now, and this is not for this year or next year or whatever. Chances the ACC dissolves completely. I've got it at a 50-50 chance, and some people will say that's really strong considering the grant of rights deal. Guys, you have to understand these teams are motivated by money. And once the new numbers officially, we've already seen the numbers with the Big Ten, but the SEC renegotiating possibly with a 9-game conference schedule, teams like Clemson, teams like Florida State, it's going to be really hard to stomach, making the amount of money they're making through the year 2036. So something is going to have to happen with the ACC's grant of rights deal. Either they're going to have to renegotiate it, and ESPN's going to have to save the ACC by giving everyone more money on a good faith thing, or maybe they want to save it because of the ACC network, or you go to something like unequal revenue distribution, which in the ACC, I agree, it would not work in the ACC. The problem is there's not enough money. So a team like Wake Forest, or even a team like Virginia Tech, or the teams that are getting screwed, if you give more money to Clemson and Florida State, they will make so much less money, they could just go to the Big 12 and get a pay raise, a significant pay raise, if you enact that unequal revenue distribution and you bump them down. So it does not work. There's not enough money to go around in the ACC for unequal revenue to work. They've talked about it because they're desperate to keep those teams in the conference, and they know the ACC's grant of rights is going to have to be renegotiated, or something's going to have to happen, because there's no way Clemson, there's no way Miami, there's no way Florida State sit here and watch teams, like Vanderbilt and some of the, Arkansas make $100 million. Some of the teams in the Big Ten, like Indiana, Rutgers, Northwestern, Minnesota, make $100 million while they're making half of that, or even just slightly more than half of it. It doesn't make any sense. So there's going to be a major incentive for Clemson to gather up the troops, per se, and get 8 teams to dissolve the conference. And the 8 teams in this scenario would be Virginia Tech voting to dissolve, Pittsburgh voting to dissolve, Louisville voting to dissolve, Georgia Tech voting to dissolve, Miami, UNC, Florida State, and Clemson. That's 8 teams. The ACC dissolves in that scenario. And I think ESPN just completely shifts. They get Big 12 Tier 1 media rights, and it becomes the Big 12 network on ESPN. And then I put the Pac-12 chances at dissolving at 90% chance, and that mainly is based off of the rumors that we heard originally earlier this week that the Big Ten is still interested in adding teams from the West Coast to mitigate the travel concerns, and they want to get to 20 teams. Whether Notre Dame is one of those teams or not, it doesn't seem like it really matters. They want 20 teams. They want a more balanced conference. And then we had Kevin Warren coming out yesterday and admitting they want 20 teams and they want to pay players, whatever it is, I don't know. But the big quote is they want 20 teams in the conference. So that is why, and in that scenario, the Pac-12, if you lose Oregon and Washington, you lose your conference. Because at that point, then you would have the 4 teams that we discussed going from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, and now you're basically screwed. So that is why I give it a 90% chance. At this point, it dissolves. It's all based off of the rumors we're hearing out of the Big Ten that they want 20 teams, they want a West Wing, and they want a more balanced conference with easier travel. It does make complete sense, and you'll also get that expanded 10 o'clock window, which could allow you to bring ESPN on and have ESPN, airing Big Ten football in kind of a Big Ten after dark thing, which I'm sure would be interesting and intriguing for the Big Ten. And then we've got the total teams. The Big Ten at 20 teams, the SEC at 20 teams, the Big 12 at 20 teams. And I don't know what happens to the American or anything like that. The one thing that I'm struggling with, like, what happens to Duke? What happens to Virginia? Does Virginia join the Big East in basketball? And then what happens to their football team? So there's a lot we have to still work out. This is just the theory for like 2025, 2026. I think the next 2 moves I know for sure. It's Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado going to the Big 12. And it's Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and then either California or Notre Dame going to the Big Ten. Those are the next 2 moves, and that will trigger the SEC to try and get teams from the ACC into their conference. And then that opens up the whole can of worms with the renegotiation of the grant of rights deal. So guys, this is just a far out there prediction. Like, let me just say, I don't like conference realignment. I think it's horrible for the sport. We're seeing people leave college football in record numbers. It's losing so much popularity. It's so sad. How do we get it back? This is not the way to get it back, but this is what's happening because of the money. And all of these moves it's like the moves just keep getting worse. And now you've got the Big Ten, who shouldn't have added USC and UCLA to begin with. Now they're like, oh, because we added these two teams, we have to get more from that region to make it more balanced and to mitigate travel concerns. So now we're compounding bad moves with more bad moves. That hurts the overall sport. So, this is not something that I like. I'm just saying, I think this is what's coming. This is what's happening in the world of college football. And it might not be these exact teams, but I'm currently seeing 3 20-team super conference. It's possible, and it all kickstarts with the destruction of the Pac-12. And we heard the rumors, we heard the propaganda, the Pac-12 is staying together. But if the Big Ten really wants Oregon and Washington, there's no way the Pac-12 can stay together. It's indescribable at that point, because if Oregon and Washington leave, the TV numbers get so bad. It would make no sense for Utah to stay. It would make no sense for Arizona State, and Colorado to stay. They would just go to the Big 12 to make more money, because if you lose Oregon and Washington, you're basically a group of 5 conference. What's your TV deal look like then? I mean, we know right now they're negotiating a TV deal, and Oregon and Washington want no exit fee. They've said that. They want to be able to leave. They know they're getting a call from the Big Ten at some point to join that conference. So that is the major issue right now that the Pac-12 faces, the major issue the ACC faces, unless ESPN literally saves that conference by giving them a better deal just off of good faith, or the idea that they've invested so much into the ACC network where they want to keep it alive. That's its only chance at survival. You cannot do unequal revenue, and you cannot keep the grant of rights deal the way it is. They will join together, and they will vote to dissolve that conference, because Clemson is going to be making they're going to be so underpaid for so long. We're talking about a deal that runs through 2036. Them and Miami, who's on the upswing right now with Mario Cristobal. Florida State, even though they've been down, they're still worth a lot. Those teams are going to want to get out any way possible of that deal, and they will convince other teams. If other teams like Georgia Tech are guaranteed a spot in the Big 12, I could see them voting out of it too. So guys, this is like an endgame prediction just based off of the intel we heard this week on how this could play out. I have nothing against the Pac-12. I like the conference personally, but I'm saying I can only predict things based on the information we're getting. And the information we're getting is not painting the Pac-12 in a positive light in terms of their chances at survival. That's all I'm saying. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.